Hello, and welcome to The Public Square, a show that explores public affairs and religious liberty issues that affect our nation and beyond. My name is Paul Goodridge, and I'm the Public Affairs and Religious Liberty Director for the South Central Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, located in Nashville, Tennessee. In each episode, we'll talk to people who are on the front lines for the fight for civil and religious liberty. My goal is to inform our viewers about issues that directly and indirectly affect their everyday life, ignite meaningful thought and reflection, inspire one to action, and integrate faith principles in how we relate to others. Today, we're going to, in this episode, this is actually season 2, our first episode, episode 1, we're actually going to talk about the Conscience and Justice Council, which is an organization made up of religious liberty and public affairs individuals from around the North American division, as well as beyond the North American division. And we're going to talk about one of the major initiatives of this council, which is the lost my train of thought, which is the convention, the annual convention. So I'm happy that you've joined us. Thank you for joining us, and let's meet in the square. So joining me today, as we talk about the Conscience and Justice Council, I'm so happy to have two of the leaders of this organization. The first is Edward Woods III, who serves as the president for the Conscience and Justice Council. And joining him is Jerome Hurst, Pastor Jerome Hurst, who serves as the vice president or the executive secretary, so to speak, of the conference. Gentlemen, welcome to the Public Square.
Well, good evening. It's definitely a pleasure and a privilege to be here with you on this evening.
Great. It's great to have you both. Great to have you both. So, Ed Woods, and we affectionately call you Woody, and so we want you to feel at home here. So, Woody, tell us about the Conscience and Justice Council. First of all, what is it and how did it come into being?
Sure. Well, all of us are Oakwoodites, so we're all familiar with IHOP restaurant. And in 2015, during PELC convention, we were all together at IHOP as founders. Pastor Jerome Hurst is one of the founders. And we got together and talked about how we could work together to help and support one another for public affairs and religious liberty. Mm-hmm. As you know, in our conferences, there is no such thing as a full-time public affairs and religious liberty director.
Correct.
At all. And it's really a rarity in unions, although Southern Union, which has an outstanding department chaired by or led by Amira and Kevin, and is well known for their Liberty Magazine campaign and well known for their Sabbath accommodation. Actually, I learned from them, because they're the gurus in that. And we were like, what can we do to make public affairs and religious liberty more than just a Sabbath accommodation letter, trolling the Pope and Sunday blue laws, and Liberty Magazine campaign? How can we make this a ministry and a service? And Pastor Hurst won't toot his own horn, but he's doing it. He's been doing this for years as a pastor at his church and connecting with the community. What a novel idea, Pastor Goodrich, but actually following the ministerial manual on page 25, where it says all ministers should join the ministerial alliance. That's what it says.
Yes.
Now, getting that in force is a different story in any conference, state or regional. But it says all pastors should join the ministerial alliance or a community-based organization for a connection. And so what we wanted to do was to leverage the talents and skills of the different people around the table and start it. And so we did a pilot in Lake Region Conference in 2016. We were in New York in 2017. We were in Houston in 2018. We were in Atlanta 2019. And then 2020 and 21, we were virtual. And this past year, as you already know, we were in California. So that's how we kind of got started as a group, supporting one another. And we said, what? We don't need to limit this to just regional conferences. Let's expand it and get some unions to help us with best practice, but also some advocates from academia and other areas. And so that's what we have now. We're 21 members. I should say, 20 members strong.
Okay.
With regards to the group. And we are not limiting ourselves to a ministry dealing with just regional conferences, but also the state conferences as well, with our three purposes being encourage thriving public affairs and religious liberty ministries at the local church level through training and mentoring, establish interactive and engaging virtual programs on the biblical basis for conscience and justice to ensure the correct interpretation of Scripture. And then last, execute an intergenerational and interfaith national convention to sustain and embrace the conscience and justice ministry.
Okay. So lofty goals. But let's step back a little bit. Pastor Hurst, Woody mentioned in terms of you've been doing this for a while. Tell me, what is religious liberty? What is it? Is it just about somebody who doesn't want to work on the Sabbath, and so we try to accommodate them? Tell me what is behind this idea of religious liberty?
Well, I think that our name, and we're not as longer just religious liberty, but we're PARL, public affairs and religious liberty, and we operate off of 7 principles within the conscience and justice, and that being prayer, your conscience, the Holy Spirit. We firmly believe that this PARL department, when we talk about social justice, when we talk about religious liberty, is steeped in prophecy. And we're talking about loving your neighbors, because if we're going to care for people and advocate on the behalf of individuals and things that are going on, we have to love ourselves. And then discipleship.
That's right.
Discipleship. So that's where that training and that mentoring. I think that while we have, and we talk, and we'll be talking about later some of the yearly conference, we also have monthly things that we do from time to time, or as current issues come up, we tried our best to address them quickly. So we try to call things to give people tools in their toolbox, so that they're able to respond to the issues and the things that are happening today. And then also it's just good for fellowship as well. So when we talk about religious liberty, we're talking about people having been able to be able to speak their conscience, to live out their conscience, and to speak up for others to be able to do the same.
Okay.
I mean, there's, when I think about it, I mean, right now we're seeing it happen with all this council culture and everything going on with Kyrie and all them. And immediately my mind, and what I said to my people, do you see how very quickly they can cut you off? So when we read prophecy and we talk about Sunday blue laws, and we talk about we being persecuted for the Sabbath because of what we believe and what we preach. I mean, you see how fast it can happen to us, and it can come to us, and try to give people the tools to be able to connect these things together.
Okay, so traditionally, I think when most people think about religious liberty, and now we're talking about public affairs and religious liberty, and I probably want to parse that out a little bit in a couple of minutes. But when people think about this idea of religious liberty, public affairs, it's either Sabbath accommodation or it's end time, events. But you were talking about seeking to meet the needs in communities. How is that relevant when it comes to public affairs and religious liberty? And either of you can answer this.
Well, I think that is very relevant to seek the needs, because we are a church that believes in evangelism. And so I see it as evangelism, following the model of Jesus, meeting the people in the streets, being able to know their needs and make friends with them so that we can give them those end time prophecies and share. It's Jesus love in action versus just preaching it. So that's how I see it. It's when we're going to the streets, it's evangelism. And so sometimes we see evangelism as preaching a crusade, but this is all evangelism when we're there for people and doing things for them in the community.
So Woody, what kinds of issues are typically germane to public affairs and religious liberty?
Well, I think it really depends on the community.
Okay.
Sometimes it could be violence. We hear about the surge of violence across the country, whether it's in Chicago, Memphis, Tennessee, with regards to the carjackings and things, there this past weekend, and just, heard about it. It could be human trafficking. It could be, when we're looking at public affairs, we want to distinguish it from community services, as we're identifying what's a troubled need in the community, not in terms of, clothing, sheltering, but like what's it need. It could be violence, the George Floyd incident, in terms of how can we strengthen our police community relations. Those are all aspects of public affairs. And, Pastor Hurst said it well, it's really Christ's method of evangelism is found in ministry of healing. And, we look at evangelism as a big event, but we don't look at evangelism as a daily interaction. In other words, it should be an instinctive nature of who we are as Christians. Every opportunity, every stranger, every friend, every foe, it is an opportunity for evangelism in terms of what Christ did. And if we look at what Christ did, most of his ministry was beyond the synagogue.
Yes.
And it's something that we as a Black church, 80 years ago, that was our foundation. We engaged the community, we engaged the members, and we have nowhere near the technology that we have today.
Yes.
But yet they were more connected with what was going on. And unfortunately, our church, the Seventh-day Adventist Church, had the habit of following the world, when it came to slavery. The only voice we had was Ellen White, and thank God for her and our founders. But after that, it was quiet, when it came to Reconstruction. Our church was quiet. When it came to the Civil Rights Movement, our church was quiet. When it came to the women's suffrage movement, our church was quiet. When it came to Black Lives Matter too, our church was quiet. We tend to take our cues from the world, and we really need to look at ourselves introspectively and saying, wait a minute, not only do we need public affairs of religious liberty outside of the church, but we also need it inside of the church. And I just believe if we got back to the principles of our founders and leaders that we, identify in Change Agents by Douglas Morgan, Protest and Progress by Dr. Calvin B. Rock, and Seventh-day Adventists in the Civil Rights Movement by Dr. Samuel London, you saw how the church worked together, laity and pastors working together to address the needs in their respective community. And the church grew because people felt they were more concerned about them than the statistics in terms of getting people baptized in the pool. So I think is something that's really important that we need to get back to 80 years ago and take advantage of the technology and getting people engaged, because there's no reason why we shouldn't be doing exponentially better today than what took place 80 years ago. And they made significant gains and significant sacrifices. And on those shoulders, we stand as the Conscience and Justice Council.
So
Paul,
let's please go ahead.
I just want to put something together because it was brought. So while the community service will feed you because you're hungry, Paul will be advocating for policy change as to what makes you have a shortage of food or those things, or a living wage increase, so you won't have to come to the pantry to get your food.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's kind of where I wanted to try to drill down a little bit more, because part of our responsibility as a church is not just, as you said, is not just to provide, for physical needs, but also to be the voice of the voiceless, to speak to truth to power, to speak to those individuals, our legislators, those in public office, to be able to let them know of the impact that their bill or their potential, piece of legislation will have on the real everyday lives of individuals. And so I think that's an important role that we play, and one that a number of individuals who try to have this idea of separation in church and state and how they interpret that, and other individuals who seek to just stick to preaching the gospel. I can't just preach to you if I see that your voting rights are being taken away, if I see that you are being limited or priced out of housing, if I see that your water is habitually undrinkable. I have to be able to engage in that aspect so that you will be in a position to listen to me when I say, hey, the reason why I do this is because I serve a God who loves everybody and a God who wants the best for everybody.
And I think you make. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Woody.
I like, for me, one of the things that God has blessed me with is being able to connect these things. And so while prison ministries, again, I just like to give people so they can have some practical things. Prison ministries goes and visits and does a service in the prison. Pearl advocates for criminal justice reform, bail reform, and those things of those natures. As you can see how they do work together, but they do have certain aspects that they look at, and that those are some, and that is when we talk about, well, what is Paul, what is religious liberty? But if I have done those things, then those people who see you on the front line speaking on their behalf and doing that, they're more apt to listen to you when you do preach the gospel.
Absolutely.
So, and he's saying it, real well. Paul's proactive, community services, prison ministries is reactive. Just to sum it up. And I think what Pastor Hurst is saying is dead on. And it's an underutilized ministry of our church. But as he has shown through his ministry, it's a way to interest. Everybody's trying to do interest. Yes. And I think of, everybody does like this felt need. They'll do a health fair or something, get a bunch of names, but they don't follow up with them after it's over or whatever. It's more of like a scheme to me, whereas you're trying to be intentional and have a presence. You're using your church to host block club meetings, host PTA meetings, host NAACP meetings. You're making your church a focal point in the community where they know that people can get truth, but yet they make the decisions for themselves. And I think the beauty of it. Please continue. I just said that's the beauty of Pearl, is that you have an opportunity for a day-to-day engagement where you have people constantly coming to your church if you do it properly, where you're not, how can I say, you don't have to stress about baptismal goals when you're making it a sincere and intentional part of what you're doing as a ministry of your church.
Okay. Yeah. Absolutely. There's also another aspect. I know, and then we're going to talk about the convention, the annual convention. But there's another aspect of this in which the church historically has, and you kind of mentioned it, Woody. The church has been guilty of being silent. And when there are issues in other communities of injustice, of oppression, of hatred, etc., we've been silent. But yet we know now, looking in from a prophetic standpoint, we know there's going to come a point where things are going to turn on us.
Sure.
And we're going to want people to be able to come to our defense and say something on our behalf. But that's going to be a challenge if we have been silent when it has been dealing with other individuals. And so that's another reason why what we do in terms of public affairs and religious liberty and legislating for all people, whether I agree with it or not, whether whether I agree with your lifestyle or not, whether I agree with your choices or not, but you have the right to be able to think and serve and function in society just as I do. And if we try to limit, if we're okay with people limiting your rights, then we have nothing to say when they come to seek to limit our rights. So listen, one of the things you mentioned was the annual convention, and we want to talk about that in a moment. And we have a couple of other guests who are going to join us. And so stay tuned. We'll be right back after this. So we talked about the convention and the annual convention. And as Woody said, this year it was in Glendale, California. And I was able to have a number of individuals come and join us for that. This year, the theme was prophetic justice, and it was held back in September. And we had a number of workshops and seminars and plenary sessions. We had a number of interactive things, and we'll talk about that in a minute, and some field trips. But there are a couple of individuals who I want to join the program at this time. One is Pastor Reginald Robinson, who also serves as part of the of our conference in the role of men's ministries director. And then we also have a student at Oakwood University, Malika Jarvis, who is joining us, and she also serves as the NAACP president. So I think she'll join us momentarily. But gentlemen, let's talk a little bit about the annual convention. You said that it started in Lake Region, I think about 2015 or 16, and then has moved around the country. What is the purpose of this convention?
Well, the purpose is to, threefold. We want to make sure that we have training, and a training for power leaders in terms of the issues, and networking, with other power leaders across the country for ideas. With regards to that, we really want to make sure that they're on the cutting edge of the issues, that there's training and networking opportunities, but it's also, a celebration, in terms of us being able to share success stories in terms of what has gone well, how we can improve. But, one of the things that we pride ourselves, Paul and Jerome, as you guys are obviously members of the Conscience and Justice Council, is our content. We believe that our content is second to none as it relates to our convention. And that's really been, we've been blessed by the Lord to have excellent content and build on that. And as you know, we do plenary sessions, we do breakout sessions, and we always have a tour where we address what's taking place in a particular community. And in Los Angeles, we dealt with housing in terms of addressing homelessness. And so I think that's really kind of the purpose behind it, the benefit behind it. And it's good to hear from, first time attendees, with
Yes.
regards to, what they think about it. And then, but it's also good to hear from veterans as well that have participated in it. But I think our God given gift, Pastor Paul, is really the content that really separates it apart.
I
Okay,
think,
so speaking of
Brother
content,
Paul.
Pastor Robinson, let me look to you. So this was your first time at the convention. What were your impressions? How did you feel about it, and what were some of the things you were exposed to?
I honestly thought it was awesome. That first night, it kind of set the pace for me when Mr. Johnson got up and he pretty much
Now,
went
let me just
along.
clarify. When you say Mr. Johnson, you're talking about Larry Johnson, who happens to
Yes,
be the brother
magic.
of
Yeah,
Magic Johnson. And so
yes,
he
yes,
was,
yes,
kind of sharing a little bit of his testimony, but he
yeah.
was
And that's what I
also, yeah, go ahead. What was he?
Yes, no, that's what I appreciated first. Sometimes when you go to convention, there's a lot of information that does not have any personal attachment to it. It's just regurgitation of information.
Mhm.
But he walked you through his story and how he got from where he was to where he is now. And that's what
Okay.
I appreciated because me and Bobby Mann was talking about there's when you're doing something on that level, there has to be an element of your experience that helps you attach to the story or help you attach to other people. And when he was up telling his story, it drew me in, and so I was excited about whatever else was going to happen that night or through the rest of the convention because of how it started out. It was very engaging.
Mhm.
You can tell he was passionate and compassionate about what he was talking about.
So I know that particularly resonated with you because with you having a concentration or a passion for men's ministry, and with Larry Johnson kind of talking about men, boys, individuals who either have been incarcerated or seem to have
Mhm.
been had an issue with drugs and kind of coming out of that. You can see the importance of that and how we can bring it back to South Central Conference to be able to zero in and minister to this type of population, and to kind of link it with what Pastor Hurst was saying. On the one hand, you might be dealing with the immediate needs of these individuals, whether it's counseling, whether it's education, whether it's jobs, etc. But where public affairs and religious liberty comes in, it talks about the legislations that would
Mhm.
um,
Yeah,
cause the pipeline to the prison, or
yeah.
unjust sentencing practices when it comes to certain types of drugs, etc.
Mhm.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Let me turn to you, Malika. So your first time being a student, kind of representing the younger generation. How was your experience?
I truly enjoyed my experience. It was different being in California, but as Pastor Robinson was saying, the first night really made an impact. Just talking about his personal story, talking about how in depth and his passion for this kind of showed and kind of set up for the rest of the convention. Just seeing people's passion for what they were talking about and learning from people's personal experiences. They weren't speaking from a book, they weren't speaking from a
Mhm.
PowerPoint or a YouTube video. They were speaking from what they saw day to day, and
Mhm.
then giving us that knowledge so we can go back and bring it to our conferences or our universities. It was very powerful. It was really, really
Okay.
powerful.
So Woody, I know there was great intentionality in terms of putting this convention together as far as the subject matter and the workshops and the presentations, etc. Because I know that we tried to do something for pastors. We tried to do something in the area of conscience. We tried to do something in the area of justice, etc. And so one of the themes that struck me kind of throughout much of the presentation was an emphasis on relationships.
Yeah.
The importance
Yeah.
of building relations. Okay, so you can kind of resonate with me, Pastor Robinson. The importance of building relationships with individuals so that you'll know what they're going through, so you'll better be able to help and understand. I know there was a presentation that was given in terms of the Asian community and the Pacific Island community. And when I was listening to them and just some of the challenges that they were facing, that I just never thought about being, a black man in America, especially I'm a British black man in America. And there are certain things even I take for granted in terms of the impact of COVID, etc. But as they were sharing their experience, it caused me to have a greater sensitivity and a greater understanding of what somebody else is going through and how we can help them.
Well, they're talking about really suffering in silence. And if you remember during the COVID-19, the disparaging remarks of the president at that time and how they have really suffered in silence. And it really came to a head, based on the disparaging remarks during the COVID-19 and where it originated. And then assuming all Asians are Chinese and not realizing that Asians do come from more countries than just China.
Absolutely.
And actually, one of our PARL directors at Lake Union Conference is Korean, and just had a real good conversation with him and his wife just to understand and how he was fearful because he has 2 young children and about some of the things that were being said, here in Michigan. And, Michigan, we're a little crazy. We have people trying to kidnap our own governor. So we have that. But I thought the lady did a tremendous job of being intentional and deliberate. And if you also remember, she got an Adventist from
she's Samoan, wasn't she?
Yeah, I think it was Samoan.
She was Samoan. Yeah.
To be intentional, with our audience, in terms of doing that. But Pastor Hurst has something to say.
Yes, I think what it points out besides that is if we're going to really stand for people, if we're really going to all of that, when you talk about relationships, everybody has a story.
Yes.
And we need to take time to hear their stories so that we can better understand who they are and what it is they need. Because sometimes we just assume because this is what we want to do. Always use the example, we want to do a stop smoking seminar, but nobody's interested in stop smoking or nobody smokes, but we're just going to go a stop because we've never taken the time to hear what is needed and know what the story is. Everybody has a story. And then with and that is the people we serve as well as the people we can partner with to serve the people who are in need. And so that's very important that those relationships. That's what one of my the foundation of my presentation is building relationships, building those bridges, and so that we can connect because we don't have to do it all by ourselves.
Yes, absolutely. That was something else that really struck me. Because especially when we took the field trip to the homeless shelter and we saw what they were doing to try to just scratch the surface of homelessness. Now, they were able to partner in terms of the city to be able to build a facility. And many of our churches are not going to be able to have the finances to build homeless shelters, etc. But there are things that we can do to partner with these shelters or other agencies to still fulfill the goal of meeting these kinds of needs. Malika, you went. Oh, sorry. Yes.
Oh yeah. I just quickly. This conversation kind of reminds me of a book I read. I can't remember if it's Contagious Christianity, and it said you don't have to recreate the wheel. Find out where God is working and go assist.
Yes.
You know, and
Yes.
so that's kind of the lady that did that presentation was Nancy Yap, and one of the key takeaways I had, she said, break down barriers in order to create space for coming together.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Malika, I know that you know, because with the homeless tour, there were a couple of places that we went to, and I know that you, you know, it was kind of a meaningful experience with you. How was that?
To be quite honest, it was very, I'm trying to find the word, because it was profound, but it was also a learning experience for me. Because oftentimes we see them and, you know, we try to help as best we can by, you know, giving money or giving food whenever we can. And I've worked with food pantries and things of that nature, but kind of just seeing how they live, kind of seeing the crisis in LA, and, you
Yes.
know, just kind of seeing what they're doing as a community inspired me to do something here in Huntsville and just try to work on, because there's a homelessness crisis everywhere.
Yes.
But it kind of inspired me to keep working and to try to, you know, see what I can do in my own community. And it kind of, and I saw this, and then the human trafficking, modern day
Yes.
slavery conference they had. And that was also, they had like what it was like living in those type of areas. And that also kind of just gave like a background. We don't know what people are going through, and kind of just seeing that, resonating with them, you know, it kind of helps us understand them so we can be a better service to them. And I think seeing those two locations, even though one was a mock and one was an actual, just kind of allowed me to understand what people are going through and then to be able to help them better. And I think the conference really helped me to also see that, but also to learn how to better help them.
Okay. So yeah, just to kind of give a little bit of context to this, there was actually an exhibit, a human trafficking exhibit that they put together in one of the rooms. You go in, there were a number of different artifacts from all around the world, not just from here in the United States, where human trafficking is a major issue, but other parts of the world. You see, you kind of saw an idea of the living conditions of these individuals in terms of just, I mean, just, I can't even really say a tent. It was just some space and a mat that they would have to, you know, sleep in, etc. You saw some images on the visual images and artifacts. So it was a very moving experience, realizing, especially those of us who have children, those of us who have daughters, recognizing that, listen, you know, at 8 years old, you know, some of these, you know, girls are not just, you know, kidnapped or not just taken, but they are either sold or given, in, you know, to be able to either sustain the family or just to pay a debt, etc. And it was an extremely moving type of presentation.
And what I liked about that was it also tied to our human trafficking visit in Atlanta in 2019, if you remember that, and what we learned from Pastor Dewey Smith's church,
yes,
out there in Decatur, and the realities of human trafficking and how that husband and wife team actually got girls out.
Yes,
I thought that was just really good. Pastor Andrea King was very instrumental. Dr. Andrea in getting that together, the communications director for the Southeastern Conference, and also did a fantastic job with her workshop on human trafficking. It's a serious issue, as you can imagine, and it's a serious issue everywhere, but California, I believe, is, if not the first, it's in the top 3 as it relates to human trafficking areas in the country. And so it was just good to have that interactive exhibit, you know, present with us, and, you know, looking at human trafficking, not just from the sex trafficking, but also from the labor side as well.
So one of the things that I really appreciate about the conference is the blend that it has with the practical and the theoretical. There was a presentation that was dealing with racism and the environment. And while it might have been a little bit more of a scholarly type of presentation, it ignited this idea of thought that there is something, when you think of the environment, and you think about how there's a lot of misconceptions about how we treat the environment, but there is a link between racism and mistreatment of the environment. And so you have that type of theoretical side, but then you also have the practical side. We talked about, there was somebody who did a presentation in terms of how to build a community, what's the word I'm thinking of? Like a community network type of situation. We talked about how to deal with individuals who are either incarcerated or are dealing with drugs, etc. But then you also had the hands-on side of this, where the field trips, the visits, whether it's to when we went to, I think it was Montgomery, the memorial.
Right.
So that you can see what's going on in some of these places. You can see what's going on in terms of homelessness or in terms of human trafficking, etc. And so, as we kind of wrap this up, tell us about next year, because I know we're already planning for next year. Tell us about where it's going to be and some of the things that we're hoping to do for this conference next year.
Well, next year, we're going to be in Baltimore, Maryland. We're finalizing the sites. We've already looked at one. We have 2 additional sites that we have. We like, as you notice, we're very intentional about having intimate sites where we can, see a lot of familiar faces because we're the ones in the building. And it just creates a nice, safe environment with regards to that. So we're looking going to Baltimore. Dr. C. Wesley Knight will be our Sabbath morning speaker. We already arranged for that. One of the things that we will be talking about is the assault on voting rights and talking about the 3-legged stool of voting, which is redistricting, voter registration, and the election.
Yes.
And so we have some people who are with the Baker Hostetler group that's going to work with us. We have a professor from Georgetown. It'll be like a plenary session. But you will see before the 2024 election what is being done as relates to voting rights and its impact on democracy. So that's just some of the few things that we have. But obviously, as part of the planning team, you'll know that we have some more things to go. Sure. But those are just kind of the 2 things. We talked at our last meeting that you involved were, along with Pastor Hurst, about extending our workshop times. Extending our workshop time so that we can have more meat and, I should say more time to talk.
Yes.
We have a lot of content, but there's not a lot of time to digest the content.
Digest it and really, wrestle through with it.
Pastor R.E. Robinson and Malika, we heard you. We believe in listening to people who actually come and share, and we do that, so we can make the conference better. So we're looking at doing that part. So that will make an adjustment in the schedule. We're identifying different spots to go to, possibly in Baltimore area. Dr. Jack Doggett, who's an attorney in his own right, and the Public Affairs and Religious Liberty Director for Allegheny East is kind of the lead, the point person. He's also looking for a place for us to visit. We will have a pre-conference where you'll come in early if you so desire to go to the African American Museum to be a part of that. I just want you to know that can be something extra to do while you're there. Sure. And then we're trying to figure out what's the best way to close on Sunday to keep people there. And so we're tossing some ideas and also make it a community benefit. And what we mean by a community benefit, if somebody can only come for one day and wants to know more about the conscience and justice, what's the best way to do that? Because we do know there's an opportunity to get local people to come on for a day. Sunday might be that day. So we want to be a little bit more intentional and deliberate about that. because we know sometimes people leave Sunday morning. So what is that sweet spot to get something? As you remember, this last time in California, we did learning laboratories.
Yes.
People stayed, although it was a drop in attendance. People did stay for some of those. So it's just trying to find that sweet spot to engage, get more people involved. So if you all have some ideas, or those that are listening to the public square, please get in touch with Pastor Paul Goodrich and share those good ideas so that when we have our meeting in December, we can kind of finalize some things. But we always believe that there's room for improvement. Although we pride ourselves on our content, we always believe that there's room for improvement. And the best people to listen to are those that come. So,
I would also say that
please let
those who are listening here in the public square, as you all are closing out this year and building and submitting budget requests for 2023, that if you serve as a parole director at your local church level or whatever, that you ask for some assistance, be able to come to Baltimore and take part in this that will enhance you as an individual, as well as enhance the ministry there at your local church.
Okay, so very quickly, when is this going to be? When do people need to start planning?
September is the month. It'll be the 4th or 3rd weekend of the month.
Actually, the 5th weekend. Pastor Hurst made a good suggestion that most pastors are off on that 5th Sabbath. And as you mentioned, Pastor Paul, we have tracks, and one of the tracks we do have are for pastors.
Yes.
So we want them to be involved. So September 28th to October 1st. September 28th to October 1st. The pre-conference would start on Wednesday. So if you want to come a day early and go to the African American Museum, you can come in a day early on the 27th. But we kick off that evening on the 28th, and then we'll be done on the morning of October 1st.
Okay. And sorry, go ahead.
Just one last thing. I think it was excellent how you all intertwined or wove in other faiths because of what they are doing. And so I believe we can learn while we're learning from our own people. We can still learn from others that are doing excellent work in those areas. And I just appreciated the fact that it wasn't just us, but it was us and some other individuals. And I just appreciated that more than I appreciate that a lot, to see that we were working along and learning from other denominations that have this same thread, social justice and consciousness,
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So we'll share more information as it's coming up, but we just wanted to put it out there. We really are excited about what the Conscience and Justice Council is doing, what it continues to do, how it continues to serve and advocate. And we want you to be a part of this. We want you to benefit from the information that we share. And I want to thank our panelists, Woody, or I should say, let me be more formal now, Edward Woods III, the president for the Conscience and Justice Council, Pastor Jerome Hurst, the vice president for the Conscience and Justice Council, Pastor Reginald Robinson, who is an attendee, but also serves as the men's director for the South Central Conference, and Malika Jarvis, who's a student at Oakwood University, who also serves as the president for the NAACP chapter. Thank you so much for joining us. And please stay with us because we have a little bit more when we're just going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. So every episode that we have in the public square, we want to reserve just a little time to zero in on South Central Conference, to let you know what's happening in the area of public affairs and religious liberty in South Central Conference. And so with me today is Kevin James, and Kevin is the Associate Public Affairs and Religious Liberty Director for the Southern Union. Kevin, welcome to the public square.
Thank you, Paul. Good to be here with you.
Great to have you. So listen, we just have a few moments. So just give us maybe one or two highlights of things that are happening within our territory, whether it's Kentucky, Alabama, Tennessee, Mississippi, panhandles of Florida, that either we need to be aware of or think about, etc., when it comes to public affairs, religious liberty, and the impact that it has on our everyday life.
Well, yes, there's always something going on. And first of all, I want to congratulate you on your second season getting started.
Thank you.
I feel privileged to be on this first episode, and also following such a great cast that you had just previous on the conscious and social justice, an important ministry that Woody and Brother Hurst have put together. And who would have known that it was over a stack of pancakes that you started in such a good way? But I hadn't heard that part of the story. I was kind of in the beginnings of all that, but I never heard that part before. But anyway, I was delighted to hear that. But getting back to Central, I'm not sure in other episodes if anything was mentioned specifically. What I'm thinking of in South Central was the recent situation that happened with Oakwood Academy.
Okay, yeah.
And that was an important situation. You know, the Mustangs had won their final game back in February, mid-February or so, and then that put them into the state championships for 1A high school basketball, as I recall. And it was at that point that they discovered that their first game was going to be at 4:30 on Saturday.
Yes.
And parents and coaches got together very quickly to see if there couldn't be a switch done. There was 3 teams involved, the one that was going to be playing the Mustangs and 2 others that were playing each other. And they were actually all in agreement that they would make this switch, and that would put the Mustangs on a 7:30 schedule, I believe is how it went.
Yes.
And as they approached the Alabama High School Athletic Association, which governs, of course, high school sports in the States, they reminded them that Oakwood Academy had signed an agreement that if they were ever, that there would be no changes in schedule. They would not request any changes of schedule based on their needs for religious observance. And what was also egregious about that, and what was interesting, is that that letter was done back in 2017, I think it was. So it was 5 years previous. Nobody had known about it. And but of course, the Athletic Association reminded them dutifully of what that was. But what was really fascinating was the targeting that happened in that situation. And that was, what I mean by that is the Alabama Athletic Association knew that Oakwood was a Seventh-day Adventist institution.
Yes.
And specifically targeted them. No other Christian organization or religious organization or even a secular organization had to sign any rights away.
And I think that's an important point, Kevin, because legally you cannot be required to sign away your religious rights.
No, being a state agency, which the Athletic Association is, they have to abide by free, First Amendment rights, protection of First Amendment rights, being willing to accommodate First Amendment rights. And the association just simply was not going to do it. And what was fascinating about it is that they drew up that agreement specifically because Oakwood was a Seventh-day Adventist institution. Now, back in those days, the boys weren't winning as many games, and it flew under the radar all this time until suddenly this last year the Mustangs did so well. This letter comes up. Well, we had to address that, obviously, because that was an egregious targeting of religion and practice, that a organization was required to surrender their beliefs and practices in order to be a part of this organization that's a state sponsored organization.
Yes.
And so, and especially when no other organization had to sign away anything. In other words,
Absolutely.
there was no Sunday observance groups. If the tournament was to go into Sunday, and let's say that there was an academy that was very observant of Sunday, and that they wouldn't play games on Sunday. There are still many Sunday observers that do this. They do not partake of any kind of secular activities on Sunday.
Yes.
So, but nobody else had to do that. It was just the Oakwood Academy that had to. So by God's grace, we did take that up. And because it was such an egregious, it wasn't, again, when we're working religious liberty, we're not just working for ourselves. This is an issue that impacts anybody in any religious life. For example, if there was an academy that observed Sunday, or an academy that observed, for example, it could be a Muslim academy, who wants to be involved in this. Anyway, it was our desire was to address this egregious issue about the letter. So not only were we addressing Mustangs, but we were addressing all others of faith too that could have been potentially impacted by that kind of viewpoint from the athletic association. So, and they did end up creating a rule that no organization would have to surrender any kind of religious practice, that there would be accommodations found. It's moving ahead of time, just shifting schedules slightly, however that would work out. So we were able to, by God's grace, get that agreement anywhere. So that was settled, I believe, in my notes here. I think it was September 22nd of this year. So it hasn't been too long.
Yes.
Now, of course, we couldn't affect the tournament this year. It was too late for that.
Yes, but moving forward.
Anything for future moving on. Yeah, so we're really, really excited about that.
So that also kind of brings up another important point in terms of, so there was some things egregious things happening, and we needed to address it. But in and of Oakwood Adventist Academy, in and of themselves, they're a school, they're an academy, they're not a law firm, etc. But yet we were able to connect with our lawyers, Seventh-day Adventist lawyers, to be able to represent us. And I know that part of the every year we raise an offering, in religious liberty offering, and part of that goes towards
the litigation.
Litigation, and being able to have attorneys, brilliant attorneys, represent our cases. Because I remember there was a case of an individual who was, I think this was in Florida. He was working for Walgreens, I think it was.
Oh, yeah, that was my case. Yeah.
Okay.
The Patterson case.
Yes.
Yes. No, we did. And I had another case also after that, interestingly enough. Both of them we attempted to address by petitioning the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court, to hear the cases, because there's a part in labor law that labor law protections that we're trying to get changed. That was an egregious decision made back in 1978. A lot of organizations now feel that has got to be turned. It was in what they call the Hardison case. And the idea behind it, I guess I should say real quickly, in labor law, is that a company has a duty to accommodate, a reasonable accommodation to a person of faith in the workplace, as long as it doesn't pose an undue hardship to the company.
Yes.
Now, prior to Hardison, the understanding was that it would impact the company in some kind of severe way, or impact employees in a severe way. Where a company wasn't able to meet the goals for which it exists. Yes. So there's a balancing act in that. But what happened in Hardison was that the courts ruled that a company is only required to do a de minimis, a very low standard of what can I say, hardship,
Yes.
especially in the area of finance hardship. And it's so low that, it's not very high. We want to build that up
Yes.
that there is some kind of a significant impact on the company. So we tried to take those two. We had two cases that I had. One was the Patterson case from Walgreens. We've been working together, Daryl and myself, since 2008. We knew each other.
Yes.
We had one instance, and then we had another instance that I believe started in 2011, which ended up becoming the incident that went to the Supreme Court. And although we lost that, we didn't get the petition in. We came very, very close.
Yeah,
but,
absolutely.
It didn't quite cross that threshold the Supreme Court wanted to look at. Our next case was my case also that looked even better. But again, the Supreme Court, for whatever reason, didn't adopt that one either. So
Sure.
That's where we're at.
But the fact that he was even able to get that far to be considered by
Yes.
the Supreme Court. This is not something that happens just overnight, but it
No.
takes,
That was, like I said, 2011. I mean, we're going all the way
exactly.
back. And when you're talking about the litigation committee, we're working with attorneys within the state. And many times those attorneys are, and you talk about in social, conscious and social justice, they're talked about being a part of the community and
Yes.
contacting people of influence and having relationships with them. Our leader in North American Division, Orland Johnson, has termed a phrase ever since he's been in that position here a few years ago, where he says, we need to go and make friends before we need friends.
Yes.
And the idea is that, when our turn comes, as far as if things turn against us,
Yes.
we need to have those friends that would voice at that time.
Absolutely.
And so to make friends before you need friends, I think is a really sharp strategy. And we've been able to make a lot of friends. I mean, it was the Beckett Fund or the Beckett organization that helped. It's a non-Adventist organization, but helped us in the Oakwood Academy case. And so we do that on a number of times. We've worked with other individuals, and it's been a witness to them. I can remember just a lovely dinner that I had with the attorney that helped us with the Daryl Patterson case.
Yes.
And he was very impressed with Daryl's witness and how he conducted himself as a Christian through the whole thing. And all of us were heartbroken when we didn't get to the SCOTUS, to the Supreme Court of the United States. But it was influential upon that attorney who we worked with in Daryl's case, and it was a great impression upon him. And so there is this. What we're trying to do is to be in the community and try to make those policies and that affect everyone and not just us.
Okay. Well, thank you, Kevin, for you reminding us of that, and also letting us know the impact that the religious liberty offering has, because you never know if we may be falsely accused of something, or if we may be experiencing discrimination, and we need somebody to fight for us, to defend us, to work our legal case. And so there is a fund that we can continue to contribute to help us. So thank you for reminding us of that. Thank you for letting us know just some things that are happening here in South Central Conference. And when we meet again in terms of our next episode, I'd like to invite you to come back and share, other things. We want to keep our constituents abreast of things that are happening all around them that impact their everyday life, so that we can be aware. Hopefully it can inspire us to action, so that we can advocate not only for ourselves, but for others. And so thank you for joining us.
You're very welcome.
Public Square.
Pleasure to be here.
And we'll be right back after this break. So we've come to the end of this episode of our first episode of season 2, and we want to thank you for joining us. Hopefully you've heard something that has informed you about issues that maybe you were not fully aware or abreast. Hopefully it has ignited thought and reflection for you. Maybe it's inspired you as it inspired Malika to come back to her situation and to do something about the issues surrounding her. And hopefully it's also is enabling you to integrate your faith principles in how you relate to other people. We're glad that you've joined us. We will be meeting again in the public square. And at that time, I would, hope that you would join us. If you need to get in touch with me, you can get in touch with me either through the conference office, or, I can, leave you my email. My email is pgoodridge@scc-sda.org. That's pgoodridge@scc-sda.org. So thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time in the public square.